Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. Ukraine War News Update, second part thereof for the 2nd of July 2024. We are going to start with a summary of what Germany has delivered over the last month, the month of July, to Ukraine. There isn't all that much news at the moment of new pledges to Ukraine. I don't know if that's to be expected given the flurry after NATO's summit and the peace summit of all of these pledges and calls for support and answers to those calls. So perhaps this is exactly what you'd expect, but certainly seems to have dropped off in terms of support. Now, Germany has, though, continued to support Ukraine in very meaningful ways, as has the US, so that they've just recently talked about a $200 million package. That is all of the ordnance that the Ukrainians chomp through on a weekly, monthly basis. So they're getting a bunch of that out to Ukraine, as they continually do, as well as providing 1.5 billion for USAI. So orders, though there are no details from the Americans or Ukrainians as to what that will be spent on. But here the Germans have provided over the last month a Patriot system, 20 Sonnerbot 5. Those are the unmanned surface vehicles, so they go underwater and they can give a readout of what's below them. They search for mines and things like that. 30 vector drones, so those are aerial reconnaissance drones. 200 mobile drone jammers. 8 Leopard 105 main battle tanks. 2 Bergerpanzer 2 ARVs, armoured recovery vehicles. 4 Vicent 1 MC mine clearing tanks. Special armoured vehicles, pickup trucks, a couple of them. Detonators, smoke grenades, ground surveillance radars, 2 TRML 4D air surveillance radars, incredibly useful those are. 150 rifles, 10 sniper rifles. We've got grenade launchers, assault rifles, missiles for the Patriots. We have 30,000 rounds for the Gepards and Cheetahs. 5,000 155mm shells, 58,000 40mm ammunition for grenade launchers, helmets, SAT-cube terminals, I presume, an alternative to the Starlink, 150 night vision goggles, and they've pledged 14 Leopard 2A4 main battle tanks, which is a Ringtausch to the Czech Republic. So the Czech Republic are getting them, and then they'll supply the Czech Republic. And then another Bergerpanzer 3, actually, ARV, again, Ringtausch with the Czechs, and then 4 more mine-clearing tanks as well, the Vicent 1 MC. So Germany is doing an awful lot, don't forget that. In Turkey, second Ukrainian corvette, the Hetman Ivan Vyhovsky, was launched yesterday. So Turkey have been building these 2 corvettes, and you're wondering maybe, how they're going to use these ships. They obviously won't be able to get them into the Black Sea. And even if they did get them into Black Sea, they'll be target number 1. But these would have been ordered long before the war started. But the second one was launched yesterday. Ceremony was attended by Olena Zelenska, Defense Minister Umarov, Navy Commander Nej Papa, and others. Another corvette, Ivan Mazepa, is already completed and ongoing trials in the Black Sea. Oh, goodness, really? Interesting. So are they being built in Turkey on the Black Sea side, and so therefore can be launched into the Black Sea? Interesting. I had to look into that one. But there you go. Have to get some more deets on that. Okay, Defense Ministry is to purchase Ukrainian-made unmanned ground vehicles. Ukraine's Defense Procurement Agency, DPA, has signed an agreement with a domestic manufacturer to purchase ground-based kamikaze drones, according to the Defense Ministry, from the 1st of August. Ukraine's experimental ground drones whether any of these that you see on the screen at the moment are going to be part of what are procured, I don't know. But here are some that engineers have been developing. Remotely controlled robotic combat platforms designed for roles including weapon carriers, logistics support, tow trucks, mine layers, deminers, and self-destructed suicide drones. So that's the kamikaze drones, the UGVs that were just being mentioned. But here you have, look, a number of heavy machine guns there on them. That's these ones that will drop mines. That looks like it's just for carrying supplies. And that penultimate one might have been a kamikaze one. Just loads of different drones doing different things, and this is going to be pretty interesting to see what UGVs we see on the battlefield from both sides actually over the course of the next few months. There seem to be more UGVs being utilized as the both sides have been doing their R&D and producing these. So yeah, talking about R&D and producing new drones, Russian armed forces have started using a new type of drone, aerial drone, a UAV, made from foamed plastic. The Gerbera, according to a Russian presentation video, is made in 3 versions: a signal intelligence drone, a SIGINT drone, an explosive kamikaze drone, or a decoy. There have been talks about other types of drones being used in the Shahid attacks that we've recently been seeing, with different functions, some possibly being decoys. You just send in a cheap foam drone. You can make them much more cheaply than obviously one with a huge warhead on, and attract the Ukrainian air defenses to take them down, and hope that they take it down with an expensive interceptor. But we'll keep an eye on that. Okay, military correspondent Romanov, so one of the Russian mill bloggers, complains about the monopolization of the production of Russian FPV drones by the Sudoplatov company, which previously distinguished itself by supplying drones to the front with the same frequency, which the Ukrainians figured out and were able to destroy those drones. So Romanov says that from now on, all drone manufacturers will be subordinate to Sudoplatov. Great news, says War Translator Dmitry there. So let's have a look if there's anything else to add here. Currently, the focus is on quantity rather than quality of applications. As a result, more drones fly stupidly into the ground, says Romanov. But what comes to the top is beautiful statistics in numbers. We heard about this yesterday with the claim from Belousov that 4,000 drones are finding their way to the front line. People are arguing whether that meant they were constructing 4,000 a day, or whether that was just 4,000 being used, and was that just a tick box exercise. Moreover, the merchants from Sudoplatov Doomsday came up with a new schematosis. Through the Ministry of Defense, they are preparing and pushing for monopolization under the already crap Doomsday, maintaining a single standard for FPV and introducing a ground control system, GSU 2.0. According to their plan, all other manufacturers and suppliers, including volunteer drones, will be required to work only through it. There are no fewer issues in it than in the FPV VT40, which is discussed in the video. I don't know about that. Now, accompanied by all this music, preparations are underway for cutting the conclusion of a contract worth, attention, 120 billion rubles. The schematosis, due to resonance, don't know what that means, was previously unable to be sold even under Shoigu, but they say it has already been poured into the ears of the new minister. The lobbyist is the Deputy Minister General Krivoruchko, who still retains his position under the new team. In the author's video, filmed in the Northwest region, analysis of the issues is the same as NSU 2.0, as well as analysis of the jams of the still supplied and operating at the same frequencies FPV Doomsday. Okay, from what I get from that is that there appears to be wide-scale corruption, one would think, in order that the Deputy Minister is basically ensuring that Sudoplatov are monopolizing the drones, and that means that there isn't going to be the kind of free market R&D motivation. There isn't competition, and through competition you get healthy attempts to get a competitive advantage over competitors, and by providing something that is more useful to the front line, because you're reacting to frontline needs, and each individual manufacturer is able to do their own kind of R&D and bring out their own version of a drone that is successful in any given context. Point being is that if on the one hand, a monopolization can make things kind of easier, and you're able to just, mobilize your production facilities to produce shed loads of these drones, but they're all the same. And if they all have an issue, like if that one platform has an issue, then they all have an issue. And if the Ukrainians are able, as seems to be the case with this Doomsday drone, able to jam it through them all operating on this particular frequency, then that's all your drones useless all at once. Whereas if you have loads of different drone manufacturers producing all these different drones, yes, it is kind of complex, or you have to learn all these different things about these different drones, but there's less ability for the Russians to overcome each of these drones because they're all operating in slightly different ways. And it is possibly healthier in terms of drones are more likely to achieve a competitive advantage over the Russian drones and Russian electronic warfare, and so on and so forth. Yeah, all of these different manufacturers and entities putting in loads of effort into gaining the competitive advantage over the Russians and over electronic warfare means that I think the Ukrainians are in a better position than the Russians. And this Romanov piece goes, I think, very much towards that. Okay, another one here. So this is from Darktinus. Don't know who that is. But there have been 3 separate decisions taken by the Russian state in the last 2 days that seem to hint Russia is reaching the end of its ability to replace their losses without resorting to another large wave of mobilization. Yesterday, Putin signed a decree, more than doubling the bonus for signing up to the war, 400,000 rubles. That comes on top of increasingly large bonuses offered by the regional governments, which can go as high as 1.9 million rubles. The State Duma of the Russian Federation rejected a bill, which the same Duma came up with in near full agreement a while back, that proposes fathers of 3 or more children and fathers of children with disabilities be exempt from military service. So in other words, they are rejecting a bill for exemption, which means that they need people on the front line more than they need fathers of 3 and disabled people to not be on the front line. Things are desperate. And third, some 2 years into the war, the Russian MOD suddenly decided to show some aftercare and pay the disabled Donbass veterans a one-time bonus up to 6 million rubles, about $70,000. So I'm not sure about that last bit, what that tells us. But certainly the Russians, I think, are indicating that they are in fairly dire straits with regard to replacing losses of personnel and material, as I've discussed many a time. Right, if you don't know what's been going on in the UK, there has been, right, we've got a new government, Labour government, sort of centrist, centre-left government in charge. They were able to get in because the right was split by Reform, who were this insurgent Nigel Farage party that is very much against immigration, right? So immigration is a big thing for many on the right in the UK. Now, that didn't go away with Labour winning. What that split vote meant is that these guys didn't get representation, but there is this kind of burgeoning far right that is still very much fired up by issues of immigration, and they are ripe for being manipulated. So what happened recently in a place called Southport, which it's not too much of a problem place, there's no particular poverty there or whatever, but there was a kind of a yoga class, I think it was a Taylor Swift dance, yoga, some issue going on, where a 17-year-old kid came in and stabbed a bunch of other children. Now, some people on my threads are like, oh God, yeah, UK and knives and whatnot, and this wouldn't happen in the US or something like that, and making a claim about guns. And by the way, when we have knife attacks, right, that translates in the US to gun attacks, right? And with knife attacks, you get far fewer casualties. They're horrible, horrific, horrible. Someone going around trying to stab people. But that's preferable than someone going around with an AR-15 shooting up crowds of people, right? So the reason we have knife attacks is because our mentally unstable people aren't able to get hold of guns. Anyway, I'm just answering someone going off on one on my threads that was completely wrong, like literally 100% wrong. Anyway, what happened is this kid, for some unknown reason, probably with mental health issues, that's a speculation, has gone, I can't see why else you would stab like children. So 3 young girls died and other people were injured, and it was absolutely horrific. And then you started getting the far right mobilizing in Southport. They went to a mosque and started giving issue to mosques, and then it happened in London as well, and people throwing stuff at, I think, the statue for Winston Churchill, and you had the far right mobilizing down there. I think Nigel Farage was involved with a bit of stoking, and the issue supposedly was this kid was straight off the back of an immigrant boat, right, and had come and done this, but that was disinformation, right? And he'd been born in Cardiff, and he had gone and stabbed these kids up in Southport. Okay, now why I'm mentioning this in my Ukraine war video, you might think, what's this got to do with the price of fish? Well, here we've got the Daily Mail doing a pretty good article, actually, and I'm not a fan of the Daily Mail, as you can imagine. revealed the Russian-linked fake news website, which fueled lies about the Southport stabbings and sparked violent protests. So even in our sort of cultural milieu in the UK and the issues we're facing at the moment, Russia has its fingerprints. The allegations were leapt on by Russian state media. So the allegations that this was someone on the back of the claims, violence had been stirred up by false claims that the triple murder suspect was an asylum seeker called Ali al-Shakati, who arrived in the UK on a small boat and was on an MI6 watch list. Okay, so that's your disinformation. That then goes viral. The allegations were leapt on by Russian state media, of course. Hard right activist Tommy Robinson, who is English Defence League, anti-Muslim, right-wing fringe guy, and misogynistic influencer Andrew Tate, who added fuel to the fire by telling his 10 million followers that an illegal migrant has stabbed 6 little girls, adding, "Wake up." So on and so forth. This went on, and you had, I think, Nigel Farage getting involved. Anyway, the Mail says the Mail can reveal that Channel 3 Now, which claims to be based in the US but was paid for high-end privacy protections, started life 11 years ago as a Russian YouTube channel that posted videos of rally driving in the snow in Izhevsk, a Russian city about 750 kilometers miles east of Moscow. The drivers named in the videos have connections to the country's defense and IT industries, including a man who appears to be a former KGB operative who has since served in Russia's parliament. Channel 3 Now was inactive for 6 years before it suddenly began posting bizarre videos in English in 2019, including one about a tiger being beaten to death and a match report on the Manchester City women's football team. 2 years ago, the videos began to look like the output of a professional news channel. In June last year, Channel 3 Now set up its website, which has been accused of sharing racially motivated clickbait. The website has routinely changed its name and has gone by Fox 3 Now and Fox 3 News in an apparent attempt to copy the name of legitimate news organizations. It appears to be using internet servers in the US and is registered with an online hosting company in Lithuania, but has privacy features that hide its owner's identity. Last night, Channel 3 Now posted an apology on its website for spreading incorrect details about the attack, in which the fake news organisation said it had made sure that the team responsible for publishing this news is fired. The apology contains several errors, and when the Mail ran the wording through 5 separate AI language checkers, 4 said that 100% of it had been written by the AI program such as ChatGPT. In other words, this is not a proper news organisation, not making a proper apology. In its online report, the Southport stabbings, Russia Today, so the state media organisation for Russia, Vladimir Putin's state broadcaster, repeated Channel 3 Now's lies. Remember, we talked about this previously, that YouTube will produce some anonymous YouTube account or fake news account or whatever will produce these claims of disinformation that gets taken on by other people, and then that gets there's a bit of a snowball effect, and it gets taken on by local news media sources in those countries, and then it spreads even further, and that gets imported. So they don't import the source often, they import the reporting of the source from more mainstream media outlets in the country. So Russia Today, for example, will import those news pieces and spread that to the Russians, and what they're effectively doing is spreading to the Russians their initial disinformation. So they seed this stuff, it grows, it flowers, and sends off its own seeds back into Russia, and they import what they themselves have sown. This is how it works, and this is like the Daily Mail has done some really good analysis here to show this. It has since put an editor's note on the article saying the outlet later retracted the claim. The first mention of the suspect's false name appears to have been shared to the near 50,000 followers of a well-known UK anti-lockdown activist. It came at 4:49 on Monday, around 5 hours after the attack that left 3 primary school girls who were attending a Taylor Swift-themed dance event dead. 2 minutes later, the details appeared on Channel 3 Now, where they were amplified to millions of people across the internet. The tweet was later deleted, and the activist saying it was irresponsible to have posted it in the first place. I shouldn't have. So on and so forth. And people this has caused riots or near riots or definitely violent gatherings, in police cars getting burned. As I put on Facebook the other day, why burn? That's your tax pounds. Why are you burning police cars? Because some random bloke has stabbed someone. And of course, it's not because of that. It's because they think that the country is not doing enough about illegal immigrants coming in on boats. But that's not what's happened. So you've effectively got Russia here. You could argue Russia has caused riots to take place in the UK where police vehicles have been burnt. And then someone else here, so Alan Rudsbridger, says there's a direct connection between the Southport riots and Elon Musk. Not that he knows or cares. This is my column. So he's written a piece in Prospect, which is linking disinformation coming from Russia to places like Twitter. So it's equally probable that, he says partway down, if you told Musk that he was in some way responsible for these riots 5,000 miles away from 7 homes he owned in California, he would scoff. Two things you need to know about Musk before we delve into the events of these past 2 days. The first is that he's as close to free speech absolutist as it's possible to find. He may draw the line at illegal speech, if only because assorted law enforcement and regulatory authorities would have him, but otherwise on X, anything goes. It can be hateful, inflammatory, racist, and or plain untrue, and he couldn't care less. Actually, let's look at that. That's not quite true. So there are lots of people, this is Chris Owicki, I refer to an awful lot, complaining that this is about as clear a demonstration you could wish for that Elmer has exempted specific accounts from whatever vestigial content moderation still exists on the site. In other words, where there is some content moderation where you get banned for using these words, some accounts are not banned, and they are because they are preferred accounts by Elon Musk. So here's an example of these, homophobic expletive, don't belong in women's sports. So this is that divisive thing about trans people. Actually, the person, if this is referring to the female boxing match between the Algerian and the Italian, this wasn't a trans person. This was someone born with XY chromosomes. So anyway, and someone tests this. I'm not mad about her, but why can she say it and I can't? Say it, only fear God, says that person. And then someone says it and is limited straight away. So visibility limited, this post may violate X's rules. Whereas she can say it and is not limited, somebody else says it and is limited straight away, right? So, okay. There are lots of claims saying that there are problems. So Pekka Kallioniemi says community notes are useless. So what happened is Musk got rid of moderators. He got rid of the whole moderation team. So you can say anything you like. And he said, right, we're going to have community notes working, which is people then call out disinformation and then do a community note that corrects the mistruths. The problem is, by the time the community note goes up, as someone says here, they are too slow and often weaponized. Most people will never see the note, and once they finally appear, a viral post may have already millions of impressions. And War Translated, Dimitri said, mostly, yeah, by the time this information gets noted, it can get 10 million views easily. Most of these won't come back to read the community note. So the damage is done. And there's lots of really good discussion here on how community notes is not up to standard. I like it when it works, but the damage is already done, right? Anyway, one of the first things he did when buying Twitter or X was to scrap or downsize the teams that tried, however ineffectively, to make Twitter a place of decent and honest discourse. Proven liars and conspiracy spreaders like Alex Jones were welcomed back with open arms. The second is that Musk shares with his hero Donald Trump an utter disdain for what he sneeringly calls legacy media. Only this week he reposted to nearly 200 million followers that this from David Sachs, another friend of Trump, quote, the biggest divide in the electorate is between people who get their information from independent media and those who are brainwashed by the MSM, mainstream media. It was seen by 4 million people. So the idea is that mainstream media, it has its weaknesses, right? But there are regulations about publishing that they are beholden to, right? And they can't just say anything. Whereas on these independent media sources like Twitter, people can say what they like, right? And they're welcomed for doing so. In fact, they are incentivized for doing so by causing rage, by saying like truly crazy stuff, and then that gets more and more clicks and they get monetized off the back of that. So he continues here. This is what happened within hours, and this is really important, hours of local 17-year-old boy being arrested for mass stabbings. Untrue narratives started circulating on social media, naming him as Ali al-Shakati. Remember, this is coming from Russia, a Muslim migrant to the UK, alleging he was on the MI6 watch list and he was an asylum seeker and was known to Liverpool Mental Health Services. None of this was true, but research by Dr. Mark Owen Jones, an expert in digital authoritarianism, has traced how this kind of speculation rapidly notched up 27 million impressions on social media. The self-proclaimed misogynist and alleged rapist Andrew Tate, with nearly 10 million followers on X, posted a false image of the supposed attacker, claiming he was straight off the boat, even though by then the police had told us he had been born in Cardiff 17 years ago. But that, according to Tate, was a lie promoted by what he calls the Matrix. One of the most prominent amplifiers of this untrue information was a shadowy organisation calling itself Channel 3 Now. Quite who is behind this outfit is unclear. Investigative journalists soon found out it started life as a place for Russian car rally videos, as mentioned. It may now be run out of an address in Pakistan or the US. That's the joy of Musk's beloved independent media. You haven't got a clue who half the fabulists are. The other half, the cleverer ones who merely insinuate or metaphorically wink as they parrot, miss or question mark the truth, are more familiar. So Andrew Tate doing that dangerous stuff, and then when being called out saying, oh, that's the Matrix. In other words, even when you point out the truth to them, they're like, yeah, you're just part of the conspiracy. There's our old friend Tommy Robinson, a racist thug calling himself a journalist with a following of 800,000 on Musk's platform. He seamlessly discussed the Southport stabbings in the context of Muslim violence. He has quite a following of other racist thugs who are only too willing to take to the streets. I think we can take it to Tommy. Tommy knew what he was doing. The former GB News presenter Lawrence Fox, with 500,000 followers on Twitter, proclaimed, enough of this madness now. We need to permanently remove Islam from Great Britain. This is what Russia want, right? That's the rhetoric they want, division. They have done just a very simple thing with Channel 3 News Now. Bosh, the dominoes fall, and you've got Lawrence Fox, who ran for mayor of London, who was a GB News presenter. I despise the man, but saying we need to permanently remove Islam from London, this, like, the Kremlin is laughing. This is perfect for them. On his old channel, funded by the man who wants to own a Daily Telegraph, a presenter allowed a retired policeman to ramble on interminably on the basis that the attacker could be a person of potentially Somali or East African heritage. They think it's a person of Muslim background, and so that needs to be managed. More smoothly, Reform leader Nigel Farage suggested on a video rather than in the House of Commons that we were not being told the truth, and questioned why the incident was not being treated as terror-related, the old Nigel dog whistle. Within 24 hours, Dr. Jones was able to assemble and publish a map of the key accounts should spread this information. If Musk cared, his team could have done the same. We are entitled to think he doesn't care. I don't think he knows or cares about hundreds of rioters converging on a mosque in Southport on Tuesday night, injuring dozens of police officers. If you're free speech absolutist, the consequences of what you allow on your platform are someone else's problem. Of course, Musk wants Trump to be elected in November, the richest man in the world in league with the most powerful man in the world, both of them only happy to see lies engulf truth, because once you don't know who to believe, you will believe anything. We're in danger of sleepwalking back in time to the world dissected by Hannah Arendt 6 years after World War II. Quote, the real ideal subject of totalitarian rule is not the convinced Nazi or the convinced communist, but people for whom the distinction between fact and fiction, i.e. the reality of experience, and the distinction between true and false, i.e. standards of thought, no longer exist. Meanwhile, in the UK, we are recovering from a government whose core mission included weakening and undermining the BBC, so 14 years of Conservative rule, where they tried to basically defund the BBC and dismantle it, for all its faults, is still clinging on to as the most trusted and universally available purveyor of accurate information. And this is actually worldwide. The BBC is seen as one of the most reliable, just consistently through surveys, news sources that there is. So I know some of you will be like, I freaking hate the BBC. There's too many black and gay people on this TV show. Okay, let's talk about the news and what the news does, and actually that it sits pretty accurately in the centre. I think it's bereft of political opinion, but that's because it has to be, because it can't be politically opinionated, because it has to be, as a public service broadcaster, in the middle and not kind of on the side of either party. The stabbings in Southport this week were traumatic and horrific. It may be months before we're able to establish a true and rounded picture of why they happened. At least we know the true name of the suspect, so it's interesting that they released the name of the 17-year-old, because they don't normally do that. Axel Rudakubana. But what happened afterwards was, in its own way, also horrifying, and Musk enabled it, not that he knows or cares. Interesting stuff there, and I know that that's too long spent on this probably for most of you, but this is just a really interesting example of how something in the news, some newsworthy event that's taken place in the UK to do with division and rioting and social cohesion, has been essentially created by the Russians. That's just one incident. Now think about this multiplied across countries and time. Absolutely fascinating. Right, okay, in the US, first of all, the European Commission has created a special group to prepare for the possible return of Donald Trump to the White House. The group is developing a strategy in case of a sharp change in Washington's position on free trade and support for Ukraine. So the EU gearing up for a potential Trump win. Thomas Tyner says this is what allies do. They help each other. So a lot of talk at the moment on a prisoner swap. We're going to talk a little bit on this because I think it's significant, but there are some caveats to apply.
It mattered a lot. So why did they home?
You said earlier that all these negotiations require tough calls. What was the toughest call in this one?
The toughest call on this one for other countries, because I asked them to do some things that were against their immediate self-interest, and really very difficult for them to do, particularly Germany and Slovenia. Slovenia came in at the last minute, and I tell you what, the Chancellor was incredible. He was incredible.
So what's your message to other countries that may think that
Thank you very much. Thank you.
custody unlawfully?
It mattered.
I think that question at the end was, what's your statement to Putin? And he says, stop, which is what a lot of people are concentrating on. My point of showing you this, and I talked about this last night in my US elections video, is that Biden is selling this as allies working together as this globalist US rather than the isolationist US of say, Trump and the Republicans at the moment. And he's talking a lot there about how Germany and Slovenia did things that were not really in their self-interest. They are people that they had leverage with, and they've allowed the US to use them to get back people from Russia. This is the a drop mic moment that's worth listening to as well.
President Trump has said repeatedly that he could have gotten the hostages out without giving anything in exchange. What do you say to that? What do you say to President Trump now? Former president.
Why didn't he do it when he was president?
Sir, what a chance.
President Trump has
So and then he moves off, which is that some of these people were in prison while Trump was president, and he didn't release them. Trump has said very clearly that only I can release them. I'll do it, and I'll do it between when I am voted in November and my inauguration in January. And I'll XY only I can do this. Only Putin would deal with me, and then this happens. So that kind of takes the wind out of his sails there. Now, Phillips O'Brien said it's amazing that for people to acknowledge the value of allies in helping the USA, not just bashing them for short-term political gains. Overall, this is a great moment. Sometimes it's really amazing to have a president who spent 40 years immersed in foreign policy, says Tom Nichols. So these people are saying, look, here's the good thing about Biden is he is an experienced foreign policy guy, and he has been around for a long time. And you know, whether he's responsible himself for these prisoners being exchanged or not, he is going to pull on all of his experience to make sure that other nations are helping with this in a way that special forces wouldn't necessarily be able to do. And I say that because there's a point later that's worth noting. Okay, it's no small thing that among the released prisoners of Russia today was Vladimir Kara-Murza, the only true Russian opposition, poisoned by Putin twice, and unlike Navalny, opposes all the standard genocidal Russian global terror operations. Apparently, Navalny was going to be released in this, but this has been, I think, on the cards for some time. But Navalny was obviously killed in prison. Now, this is what someone has said here on my thread yesterday. I can understand the personal exhilaration of freeing political prisoners. For those released and their loved ones, in the end of it's the end of their nightmare. On a personal level, their release is a wonderful moment to be praised and appreciated, and that is exactly how Russian psyops designed us to feel. When you move past the warm feelings of overwhelming relief associated with freeing political prisoners, you consider the strategic consequences of the situation, you find that Russia just won a small but meaningful victory while making Westerners feel warm inside. I would call that a double victory. It's frustrating that Russia continues to shape the West's reactions and actions to benefit Russia. In this case, Russia designed, orchestrated and executed this situation specifically for the benefit of Russia. Without a shot fired, Russia received back intelligence assets while the West received back civilians hostages. As distasteful and cold as this may sound, trained intelligence assets are worth more than civilians. On the geopolitical Game of Thrones, Russia detained civilians with the intent of exchanging them for Russian intelligence operators held in the West. Russia plotted to get their assets back, and they achieved that end. Right, I would slightly disagree with that. Someone like Kara-Murza there is much more than just a civilian. He is an opposition. He could be like the next opposition leader for Russia in exile. I think getting someone like him back is way more important than those intelligence assets. But I do get the main point, and I'll talk to that in a second. The West was played like a fiddle. Now Russia can focus on detaining more hostages. I'm sorry, this is political weakness. It overwhelmingly benefited Russia. It encourages Russia to wrongfully imprison more Western civilian hostages. It gives active Russian intelligence operatives faith that Mother Russia will secure their freedom if caught conducting unlawful acts in the West. Right. On the one hand, I get what he's saying. On the other hand, I kind of disagree because there is no other option here. Like, this is what happens when one side doesn't play with the rules and the other side does, right? Play by the rules. So Russia just nicks people who are not who they say they are. So Evan Gershkovich, let's assume he was indeed a Wall Street Journal journalist, and only that, wasn't some kind of spy. Russia just go, let's take him and put him down on trumped up charges and we can use him as leverage. The US doesn't do that because they follow the rules more than the Russians do. Now, the problem here is that we can't control that unless we break the rules and just start arresting random Russians. Now, you can advocate for that, but that's the only way you're going to get that one-to-one swapping here of civilian for civilian. If you aren't going to break the rules and just arrest random Russians, then this will happen. And you can either leave them to rot and say, sorry, we're not gonna get you back because Russia's just breaking the rules and we're not. Or you try and get them back and make those swaps. So I understand what you're saying, but I don't see there being any other way. What the West can start doing, which they haven't done so much, is the West's approach has been to Russian Scarecrow's diplomats, which is spies, is to keep an eye on them so they know where they are. They've more recently been not isolating them. They've been letting Russia know that they know they're spies and then kicking them out of the country. Well, I would advocate possibly for trying to arrest some of these people within Europe. The problem is you need all Westerners out of Russia. You need like Steve Rosenberg from BBC out of Moscow. If you start ramping up how you arrest Russians, then Russia will just nick all of the Westerners in Russia, and I'm sure there are still very, very many. So that's a dangerous game to play. But I think it's slightly unfair to think that this is Russia. I mean, it is true that I think this is a plan that Russia has enacted, and they've successfully got back their assets. And the US has got back a bunch of other people that may seem like they are asymmetrical compared to those Russian assets. But there's no other way. Yes, this is a plan by Russia. They've executed and they've succeeded. But the US has done, I think, a good job to get... This is one of the biggest prison swaps ever of this type. If not, it is the biggest. So there is a lot to be celebrated here, but I do understand the criticisms. Now, Lukashenko has said that Biden had nothing to do with this, so the Belarusian dictator, historic prisoner exchange between Russia and the West. Lukashenko claims that the exchange was organized exclusively through the special services. Thing is, the special services won't be able to get Germany and Slovenia on side without political and diplomatic interaction. And also, Biden would have just been saying, I want this to happen. So he might not be on the ground making telephone calls. But this is a directive, surely, from Biden. So, I get this, and I say this often, the head isn't always responsible for the stuff going on down here. But in this case, there will be definite demands that this takes place. Biden won't have been going, oh, there's prisoners. Yeah, forget about it. Don't worry about it. Yeah, whatever. He'll be like, I want them back. I want Gershkovich back. How can we get them back? And then he'll set a team up and they go about and do that. So on the one hand, Lukashenko might have a sort of a point. But on the other hand, no. Washington and Moscow carried out a historic prisoner swap on Thursday, with Russian authorities releasing American journalists, former US Marine and German citizen, as well as Russian political prisoners. In total, both sides released 24 people. What you'll have from certain people, like on the Republican side in the US, saying, oh, this was a really poor swap, and it was Trump what did it, or And these are mutually exclusive, these things. It was either Trump what did it, so it's a good thing, but it was Trump that did it, or it's a bad thing. You swapped, this has been a bad deal, and you swapped really high level assets for low level assets. In which case you're saying this is a bad thing. Well, if Trump was responsible for it, then he's responsible for a bad thing, right? Or, like you can't have it both ways. And yeah, I just think we need to be careful how we understand what happened here. And I'm fairly happy that my interpretation is pretty coherent. There was, what else was I going to say to that? It's people like the dissident, Russian dissident political opposition activist and potentially leader. It could be a huge haul for the US to get. He's actually got dual citizenship with the UK as well. Ukraine has returned the bodies of 250 fallen defenders from various regions, including Luhansk, Bakhmut, Mariinka, Avdiivka, Kherson, Zaporizhia, Mariupol, Holivka, and morgues in Russia. So they 250 people coming back. And the mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo, yesterday awarded 2 Ukrainian athletes the city's highest honor and paid tribute to the 489 Ukrainian athletes who have died since February 2022. This is a really good point, and well done for France for highlighting this. There's one, I don't know who it is, whether it's Flash News, one of my sources every day reports on, this is, Anton Smith, Ukrainian skier who died in April 2023. He would have been at the Olympics type thing. And there are all of these athletes who are not at the Olympics because they have died defending their homeland. So I think that's great that France has recognised that. Well done to Hidalgo there. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, share. Take care, everybody. Speak soon.